Okay, so hello dears, welcome to our pre-recorded lecture on the next topic to your analysis of urine and body fluids laboratory, and that is the classical or confirmatory tests for the chemical exam of urine. So basically, these are just chemical tests for confirmatory purposes at mga substances na atong nabuhat or mga substances that may be found in urine, diba? So we're done with chemical examination of urine. So now what we're gonna talk about are additional tests. If in the future ganahan magani ka i-confirm ang presence, example of protein sa imong ihi or glucose man gani in the ihi. Okay, so again, these are your classic or confirmatory chemical examination of urine. Okay, all right. So, rationale, why do we perform, again, these classical tests? Because, again, ang point is there are times that we want to confirm or we want to measure the chemical substances that are present in urine. Okay? So, 9 times na dili jud ka enough. Okay? Or 9 times na dili jud enough ra ang results sa reagent strip. So, you maybe want to quantitate, yeah? You maybe want to measure the substances or you just want to check the presence if naagyud. So, we now perform this classical chemical examination. Because again, diba, remember in your mga false positive and false negative, there are many substances that can cause false positive or false negative. Now, if you really want to confirm the presence of a substance na walay mga hindrances or katong mga false positive or false negative, then you can perform these classical chemical tests. Okay? Again, these are called confirmatory because again, confirmatory, we just want to confirm if naabag yun siya dito or if naabag yung present sa glucose, sa protein, and ana. Alright? Okay? Especially if daghang mga possible na mga interferences sa sample for that particular analyte. Okay? Alright. And the 4 most common are your protein, reducing sugars, ketones, and bilirubin. Now, in your lecture ni Ma'am Bernal, nagana siya taas kay na table for each substances na siya own mga chemical tests per substance gyud na sa lecture. But for now, what we're gonna discuss lang are the tests that we use for protein and glucose. Okay, usually muna gina-perform sa lab. Okay? Alright. But again, each of your substances or chemical analytes sa urine, example, bilirubin, katong uban, urobilinogen, nitrite, and katong unsa pa to, mga porphobilinogen, mga inana, daghan na silang mga classical tests sa lecture ninyo ni Ma'am Bernal. So, nana siya 1 table, dito should 1 table, daghang tables, and then substance, and then unsa to mga reagents na gamiton, and then unsay positive results. So, as in, medyo too much information good kayo to. Anyway, alright. But for this, for lab, what we're gonna discuss lang is protein and glucose na mga classical exam tests. Okay, alright. So again, for applications, number 1, we confirm the positive results of the reagent strip. Yeah, diba? Because again, we test the chemical exam of urine through reagent strips. But if we want to confirm the presence, example of glucose, the presence of protein, we can perform these classical chemical exam tests. Again, confirm results if 9 differences in sensitivity and specificity. So again, sensitivity, the ability of a test to measure the smallest concentration of the analyte, and specificity is to only measure good the analyte of choice. Like the ability of the test to measure the ability of the test to measure only the analyte of understudy or analyte of choice. Okay? So if may mga discrepancies there, we can perform this classical chemical exam. And of course, to avoid interference, as mentioned, diba, if may mga pigments sa specimen that can hinder the color reaction sa inyong reagent strips. So if you want to really be sure, so pwede mo perform na po yung chemical exam. Ang disadvantage lang is time-consuming siya because again, kailangan tag-reagents, kailangan pila ka minutes na to i-observe ang reaction. And aside from that, we need much more reagents and sample and equipment also. Okay? Alright. Basta ang point lang yun ng classical chemical exam, it's not necessary to perform yun. In routine laboratory, as far as I can remember, I can't recall na nag-perform ni ani. But again, it's just for confirmatory. Again, if ikaw medtech, you were processing a specimen and then murag nag-wonder ka or nag-assume ka na naay daghang interferences, dili ka mo salig lang sa results sa reagent strip, you really want to confirm, then you can perform again these classical chemical exam tests. Okay? Alright, ayan. But again, di ta mag-assume kay masakitan rata. Sure. Okay, alright. Ayan. Now, we go now again to the different classical chemical exam test. Again, as I mentioned, daghan kayo na siya. Each chemical parameter sa imuhang urinalysis na or reagent strip na siya own niya na classical chemical exam, okay, or classical chemical test. But dili na ta mo go into that sa lecture na ni Ma'am Bernal, as in, ma-overload mo sa information. Okay? But for now, again, for protein lang ta and glucose, ang protein, mostly we follow the principle of precipitation. We have 3 types. You have qualitative heat and acetic acid and modified heat and acetic acid. For semi-quantitative, we use SSA or sulfosalicylic acid test. And quantitative is SBAX. And for glucose, we only have one Benedict's test. Okay? All right. Ayan. So we now go to protein. Now again, as mentioned sa inyong chemical exam, di ba, protein is the chemical parameter in your reagent strip that is really indicative or highly indicative of renal damage. Because again, it's normally found in small quantities lang in urine. And most of the time, these are the proteins that are released by the urinary tract. Now, if na ni albumin na sa ihi in large amounts, then that could be an allergy problem na gid sa kidneys. Because again, albumin is not normally released to the urine because albumin is repelled by the shield of negativity. Diba? Remember? Okay? So again, ang normal lang is less than 10 mg per DL or less than 100 mg per 24 hours. Again, if mo positive ka ng protein, albumin primarily, again, quite a small amount lang. Others, small amounts of serum and tubular microglobulins. Don't forget TAM horsefall protein, your uromodulin, the main constituent of your casts, diba? And mucous threads. Produced by the RTE cell, which is quite common, and proteins from, of course, extra-renal or outside of the kidneys, the mga sources. You have prostatic, seminal, and vaginal secretions. Now, clinical proteinuria na gani if it's greater than equal to 30 mg per DL or greater than or 300 mg per L. So if maabot na gani siya at that level, then significant na ang levels of protein. It could mean na damage na sa kidneys. Okay? Because clinical proteinuria na siya. Greater than equal to 30 mg per DL or 300 mg per L. Okay. All right. So what's the principle of protein again? It follows the principle of precipitation. Heat and acid, denaturation. Because if we subject proteins to denaturation either through heat and acid or the combination of both, what happens is these proteins tend to precipitate. Okay? All right. So, yeah, they become denatured and they precipitate out of the solution. So what happens, the solution becomes turbid because, again, of the presence of proteins. Again, when the proteins are subjected to high temperatures or pH, they tend to be denatured. Hence, after being denatured, they now tend to precipitate out of the solution. Okay, so muna yung gina-follow na principle. Alright? Okay. Ayan. So, we'll start first with the qualitative. When you say quali lang, it doesn't, we don't, wala siya numerical na counterpart. It's just subjective. We just grade, okay, like plus, okay? So first is heat and acetic acid. So first is, of course, we filter your urine sample and we fill the test tube for 2/3 full. Why do we filter? Because again, para if kato mga ubang mga amorphous phosphates, amorphous urates, kato mga other chemical or like microscopic na mga sediments and cells, dili na siya ma-appeal sa atong pag-examine. Because again, pwede po siyang makahinder sa atong pag-examine. Okay, so we filter the urine sample and 2/3 full natin ibutan sa test tube. Heat the upper finger breadth. Okay, so example, kani ang tube. Alright, so kani ang test tube nimo. So example, 2/3 full ang ihi. So this is the ihi. So you heat it, mga diri lang, 2 cm. Okay? Upper finger breadth. So igong size of your finger breadth. Upper lang, diri. Okay? Alright, and we observe for cloudiness. Okay? And this is maybe due to phosphates, albumin, and other proteins. After we observe turbidity, we now add 2 to 3 drops of acetic acid. And the purpose of the acetic acid is, pag add mo sa acetic acid, if mo disappear ang cloudiness, it's because of phosphates. Okay? So mawala ang interference of phosphates kay pag-add mo sa acetic acid. Okay? If phosphates are present, mawala ang turbidity because again, na-dissolve ang phosphates by the acetic acid. Okay? And dira na to agitate. Okay. And then repeat heating and adding of acetic acid twice in order to make the specimen sufficiently acidic. Because again, di ba, na-mention nato na if lower ang pH or as subject to heat, mo precipitate ang proteins. Okay? Alright. So, mahimong cloudy ang solution. Now, again, if persistent ang cloudiness, pag-add nimo sa acetic acid repeatedly, like twice, and pag heat pod, then it could be the presence of albumin or other proteins. Okay? So, that's for heat and acetic acid. Ayan. Okay. Dispose sample correctly and perform, of course, necessary aftercare procedures. As mentioned, urine and heat, if na ay turbid, mo-turbid sa siya, di ba, katong finger breath, it could be a mixture of phosphates, albumin, and other proteins. Now, if wala, clear lang, then of course, negative. So, it's walay presence of either those substances. Now, pag-add na itong acetic acid, if mawala ang turbidity, it means phosphates ang naa dito, kaya na-dissolve siya. But if the turbidity persists, then ang positive dito, positive siya for proteins. Okay? And again, if clear, negative, wala siya proteins. Ang other present niya dito are either phosphates and carbonates. Okay? I do hope na gets ra. Again, urine and heat, atong initon, if moturbid gani, it could be the presence of either phosphates, carbonates, and proteins. So, dili sana ito siya ma-isolate or ma-specify. But, pag-add na ito sa acetic acid, if mawala ang turbidity, then that could be na ang naaato, ang nakakos sa initial turbidity is phosphates or carbonates. Kaya na-dissolve man siya sa acetic acid, karon munang nahimo siyang clear. But if the turbidity persists, then it's really positive for the presence of proteins. Okay? Alright, so that's for heat and acetic acid. Okay, now next, we have also what we call modified heat and acetic acid. So still the same, this time, mugamit tag 5 ml of filtered urine sample. Mugamit po this time of 40% NaCl, which is 1/5 of the volume. So 1 ml of 40% NaCl. And 5 drops still of acetic acid. Still the same, finger breath 2 cm. Alright. And ang purpose sa NaCl, yung i-hold ang nucleoprotein. Okay? And the acid will dissolve the mucin so that the cloudiness may be really due to albumin or globulin. So basically, yung ano siyang i-modify, ni-add lang sila og additional reagents to really be more specific na gyud na ang ma-detect are albumin ra or globulins, which are ang atong kailangan or ang much significant. Okay? Alright. So again, the 40% NaCl, i-hold ni ang nucleoprotein that could be present in the urine specimen. And ang acid, mo dissolve po siya sa mucin or mucus or mucin, another type of protein sa ihi na dili kailangan. Okay? Alright. So para mapapuwas siya. Okay? Alright. Ayan. So this is again still the same. Dispose sample and perform necessary aftercare procedures. Again, mo-add this time of 40% NaCl. Glacial acetic acid still the same and heat. If turbid, the positive result, it's positive for proteins. And if clear, still the same, negative. Again, please take note on say purpose of 40% NaCl. It holds the nucleoproteins in solution. Okay, para dili siya mo participate sa pagka-precipitate or di siya mo precipitate og appeal. Alright? And glacial acetic acid to dissolve mucin, phosphates and carbonates and other interferencing substances. So again, ang point lang gyud aning duha is to be really more specific to albumin and globulin. So iyang walaon ng ubang interferences by other proteins. Okay? Or by other sediments or other mga chemical analytes found in urine. Alright? Okay, so muna siyang modified heat and acetic acid test. So, modified by the name itself, modified. Iyang giadan og other reagents mangani or na ay changes gamay sa procedure. Alright? Okay, so again, for this, we have 40% NaCl ang giad and glacial acetic acid, still using heat. Okay, alright. So, for reporting, so since this is qualitative, di ba? So, qualitative, we just observe negative clear, 1 plus diffuse cloud, 2 plus granular, so medyo na mga granules na makita, 3 plus distinct floccules, meaning mga dagko na mga granules na this time. And then 4 plus kay large dense floccules, sometimes solid. So medyo ano na gid siya, makita na nimo ang mga solid na mga parang dili pod powder, mura siya kanang basta solid na mga precipitates. Okay? Alright. So 4 plus. So as you can see, of course, ang solution ay mas nagka-turbid as you go to the 4 plus. Okay? Alright. So that's the tests na kailangan og heat and acetic acid. Okay? And qualitative na siya. Now we go na to semi-quantitative. When you say semi-quantitative, you have a grading and then ang grading pag yun kina siya equivalent na numerical na example concentration. Okay, and that is your sulfosalicylic acid test. Okay, so by the name itself, SSA, mugamit ta og sulfosalicylic acid. So 3 ml Japan of filtered urine, and of course, muad ta og 3 ml of 3% sulfosalicylic acid test. Or this is known as your Extons reagent. Okay? Alright. Kabantay mo, kanina test usually while I was studying also before sa boards, daghan kayong 3. Okay, so mugamit kang 3% of sulfosalicylic acid, pila ka ml? 3 ml po, o diba? Alright, so 3 ml of 3% sulfosalicylic acid, or known as your Extons reagent. Okay, and what we do lang here is we let it stand for 10 minutes. And then after, atong invert twice, and we observe for precipitation. Inarara ka siya ka-easy. So, di na siya kailangan ng heat. Okay, so ang sulfosalicylic acid test, we don't perform, or we don't use heat. Okay, alright, so this is the procedure. It's really quite short. So again, 3 ml rather. So 3 ml of filtered urine. Di ba dagang 3? 3 ml of filtered urine. Pila po unsa na reagent ang gamiton? 3% sulfosalicylic acid test. How much? 3 ml po. So 3 ml of 3% SSA, or your Extons reagent, plus 3 ml of filtered urine sample. Let it stand for 10 minutes. Okay, and then invert twice and observe for precipitation. Okay? Alright, inanara na siya. So, urine plus SSA, if turbid again, positive na siya, primarily albumin, and clear, negative. Alright. Now, how do we report? As you can see, di ba, as kabantay mo, muna siyang semi-quantitative, kaya na ay words, okay? Na ay grading, na po siya equivalent na range of protein. So, as you can see, ang negative, this is grams per DL. Ang among naandan is mg per DL. Okay? So, this is less than 6 to 30, 30 to 100, 100 to 200, 200 to 400, and greater than 400 mg per DL. Alright? Okay. Ayan. So, basically, muna among gitunan, mg per DL ni. Alright? Okay, so how do I remember lang sa grading sa SSA, no? As you can see, negative, wala gyud, wala turbidity. Trace, perceptible or noticeable turbidity. 1 plus, 1 lang, so therefore, turbidity ra. Distinct turbidity, but walay granulation. 2 plus, turbidity and granulation, pero walay flocculation. 3 plus, na siya turbidity, granulation, and flocculation. So 3, munang 3 plus. And then 4 plus kay clumps of protein. That's how I remember lang. Alright, so again, negative, walay turbidity or increase in turbidity. Trace na ay gamay. Alright? 1 plus, turbidity ra, pero walay granulation or flocculation. Munang 1 plus kay usara na turbidity. 2 plus, turbidity and granulation. So duha na, turbidity, granulation. Munang 2 plus, but without flocculation. Alright, and then 3 plus na, turbidity, granulation, and flocculation. Alright, diba? So, tulo na po, ang naa mo ng 3 plus, turbidity, granulation, and flocculation. And lastly, 4 plus, clumps of protein. Alright? And please take note the iyahang equivalent na mga range. Kanila to i-follow. Alright? You could also memorize this. As mas easier ninyo, but kani siya, mas sa'yo na siya memorize, less than 6, then range mo 6 to 30, of course, 6 to 30. So, ang next ana mag-start nag 30. 30 to 100. The next na po, 100 to 200. 200 to 400. And then, greater than 400. Okay? Alright. So, muna siya for SSA. So, again, semi-quantitative. When you say semi-quantitative, na siya grading. And then, napod siya equivalent na concentrations of protein. Alright? Okay. And this is an example of a result sa SSA. So, negative trace. 1 plus. Sa ganitong 1 plus ra, turbidity, alright? 2 plus turbidity and granulation, pero walay flocculation. Turbidity and granulation. 3 plus flocculation, di ba? Nanay flocculation, turbidity, granulation, and flocculation, alright? And 4 plus kay clumps of protein. When you say floccules, mga gagmay na mga murag kumpul-kumpul, okay? Muna siya point sa flocculation, alright? Okay, so that's for SSA. Okay, so our next video will now talk about the last test for protein, which is your S-Bax. Okay? All right.